It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is director, producer Kenneth Johnson, who's done many things such as Short Circuit 2, the V series, the Incredible Hulk series, amongst many more. What's going on?
Hi, Mike. I'm delighted to be on the movie raid and have a chance to talk to you guys and your audience.
What have you been up to?
Well, we've been for the last about 2 years trying to get the funding in place to do V the movie, which would be a major motion picture based on my original 4-hour miniseries of V, and it would be the first of a trilogy, which would subsequently be followed by 2 movies based on my novel, V the Second Generation. And I had offers from a lot of very generous overtures from a lot of the major studios in town when they discovered that I owned the rights to V, and they were very flattering, and I appreciated it a lot, but I was a little nervous about losing control if I went through through the studio system, and it was very important for me to remain in the director's chair. And so I politely said no to them, and at which point all of them said, yeah, we understand. How much money do you really want? And I had to explain to them that no, it wasn't about money. I had never gotten into this business from the beginning to the idea of, oh boy, I want to make a lot of money. I've always been involved in things that I really cared about, and the money, fortunately, has come through sometimes, not always, but I've never regretted the fact that I entered the business out of a desire to be a storyteller and to get my ideas and thoughts out to an audience rather than how much money somebody could make off of it. I think I probably turned down more work than I ever could have accomplished, and certainly turned down a lot of money that it wasn't the right move for me soulfully, and so with things like Walker Texas Ranger, which they asked me to create, and which would have made certainly a pot full of money, I said, gee, no, I don't know quite how to write for a guy that has the personality of a tree stump. I just it's couldn't get my heart into it, so I decided not to go that way. But we've been close a couple of times to getting the full $60 million that we need for V, the movie, and working at it on a daily basis.
How do you think people's going to react to this? Since we're in the future, and compared to then, they loved it then, do you think it's going to be like an off and on type deal, or do you think it's going to be a huge hit?
Well, the beauty of my original creation of V is that it really is a timeless story. It really has its roots in Spartacus and the revolt of the slaves, or the American Revolution, or apartheid, or any situation where good people are oppressed by a totalitarian or a tyrannical regime and determined that they're going to fight back. And because of that, there's a timelessness to it. Even when it aired originally in 1983-84, there was nothing in it that put it in a particular time frame. There was only one line in it which referred to a current pitcher on the L.A. Dodgers at the time, and I only put that in as a sort of inside joke between me and Brandon Tartikoff. Brandon was a huge Dodger fan, and so I threw him a little bone there. But other than that, if you see the miniseries today, there's nothing that places it in the mid-'80s. We even tried to be more classic with the kind of clothes that people wore and hairstyles and everything, so that it didn't put itself planted in a time. And so and also there's a huge international following for V. I get letters and emails from people all around the world literally on a daily basis, far more than I've ever received from all of my other shows put together. V has just this enormous following, and we are very, very confident that if we make it, they will come.
Television, do you think it's more marketable than anything else today?
Well, the bottom line is there are very few brand name international projects. There's very few things like V which have an instant recognition for people around the world. And if you Google V or V visitors or something to that effect, you get something like 70 or 80 pages of links on Google, and it's amazing. There are sites on Facebook, dozens of sites on Facebook. One of them I know some fellow started in Liverpool, has over 40,000 people on it, and that's just one of the many websites in England, France, Germany, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Japan. it was an amazing phenomenon at the beginning, and it has never ceased to be. So that, combined with the fact that it's the beginning of a trilogy, and it leads into material that people haven't seen on the screen yet at all in any way. But also my desire to do it as a big movie was partly to fulfill the vision that I had originally of Mike. But the problem was, when I did it originally 30 years ago, I didn't have the money or the budget or the time, and most importantly, I didn't have the tools that I needed. The visual effects was really at its infancy at that time, and you just didn't have the freedom with a camera that you have nowadays. Also, visual effects makeup. I was working with the same people that George and Steven were working with, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, but we were all using, prosthetic rubber masks with air tubes blowing into them. It was goofy. And the visual effects were also, this was before CGI, before you could do magical things. And as far as the makeup was concerned, nowadays, look, you can take the nose off of Voldemort, and you can do Pirates of the Caribbean. It's amazing what can be accomplished. And so the idea of bringing the story and visually into the 21st century was very exciting. The core of it, the human drama, the conflicts and the emotions that drove V and made it so successful to begin with, they haven't changed, and they won't change. And certainly I have had to do some refreshing of the script in order to bring it into the 21st century. There was no internet when we did it before. There was no terrorism situations going on. So all of that had to be dealt with, and we have. It's a very exciting prospect.
As a director, though, from a director's stance, when working as a director, do you think there are any actual boundaries, or as far as limits go, or is it just limitless to you?
Oh, no, I think that, more and more, again, our imagination often outruns the technical problems. That's what happened with V, with me, when there were visual effects, a couple of visual effects shots involving spacecraft flying and such that we did in the original V that cost about $75,000 for about 20 seconds of film, and you could do it today better on your cell phone than I was able to do it then. And I hated it then, and I knew it. I just cringed when I saw so many of the visual effects in the show, although they were state-of-the-art at the time and got huge response from both the public and the critics alike, and how exciting and groundbreaking and all of that they were, but it wasn't what I saw in my head and what I wanted to see. And but the beauty of it is nowadays I can accomplish and get it to look the way that I want to look. The performances of the actors from the original picture, though, one of the best days I ever had in my life was when I first saw our first rough assembly that the 4 different editors had been working on, and nobody had seen the whole thing, and we sat down and screened it. And this was before there were any visual effects in it at all. No spaceships, no laser beams, no matte paintings, no motion control, nothing. It was just the actors working, and it took your head off, because emotionally it was so powerful, and the performances that I'd managed to get from all of my wonderful actors were just spot on all the way through, and I knew that once we added all the visual effects and such, that was just going to be the icing on the cake. But the core, the meat of the piece, was always in the actors' performances, and certainly in the movie I would be working with a whole new set of actors, but the text is very similar in many ways. Many of the lines even are drawn from the original, and there are a few new characters as well. But the core of it and the emotional locks that it just provides with an audience haven't changed. And I think it'll be great fun to do, and even greater fun to watch an audience react to it.
Are you bringing some of that old school into the new school?
Well, I don't know that I would call it old school. I think that V was partly I had a classical education at Carnegie Mellon. It was then Carnegie Tech, the drama department there, which was very, very prestigious drama school when I was there, and we studied all the classics from the Greeks on up, and I brought that sort of classical training to all of the projects that I have done, and I think that's part of the reason that I've had a fair amount of success, and some of the shows have even really become sort of iconic. It's because I was able to give them a kind of a classical underpinning and solid, good solid dramaturgy hasn't changed for 1,000 years. It either captivates you or it doesn't, and if it does, then it's very exciting to see an audience reaction. But so the new movie of V would follow those same classical traditions, and at the same time, I think be very compelling to a contemporary audience.
I mean, we got the new age happening, and it could be, for something like this, it could be a huge hit. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
You never know, because the viewer technically is the critic, regardless of how you want it to be.
Well, that's true. And again, a lot of the studios had in mind of doing a $200 million summer tentpole kind of thing, and I was really fearful that the tail would start wagging the dog, and they didn't understand that V was never an invasion movie. V was a story about occupation. V was a story about the tensions and the drama and the suspense of not knowing if the person you were sleeping with was going to turn you in for something, or your children getting involved with the youth organization might suddenly start pulling strings and taking out on you things that kids always have against their parents, and informing on them behavior that the ruling government would not find happy. So all of those elements are really, really strong, and they're classical elements that help to give a depth and a strength to the project.
Yeah. Have you have any other projects other than this, or is this pretty much your main baby at the time?
This is the main thing I've been focusing on. I've got 2 or 3 other film projects. Some people have been talking to me about another miniseries idea that I've had and been nurturing for a while. But my focus has really been on trying to get the movie made, and we only need about $60 million to make it. I don't need the $200 million or $150 or whatever the studios were talking about. Partly because a good third of whatever money the studios are talking about gets pumped back into the studio. You end up buying carpets for a lot of studio executives and fuel for the jets, and I've been down that road. And when you make a movie for $60 million, it has a lot better chance of making a profit for our investors, and so it's really a good place to be, and we're very excited about it, and hopefully we'll be able to line it up. At the same time, it's very difficult to set up an independent picture at that budget range. Most independent pictures are thought of to be in the $10 to $20 million range. When you're talking 3 times that, it's a steep hill to climb. But we've got a lot of people that are interested, and I'm going to keep pressing until it gets done.
Yeah, big budget and low budget. Sometimes it's better to be low budget because it could also be a huge hit as well, because it just depends how you manage that film.
That's it. And I mean, the beauty of V is that it's not an unknown property. It is very well known around the world, in spite of the fact that they've made a number of failed attempts to try to do it as a television series. When the most recent version of that came on, the good news for us who were trying to get the movie made is that the first night that it was on the air, the night that the television show premiered, it got really good numbers. About 15 million people tuned in. But they were only there for 1 week, because as soon as they saw it and they said, "Ooh, wait a minute, this isn't what we wanted to see," they tuned in because they wanted to see more of V, but not the V that they were given, because it had nothing to do with my characters or storylines. It was very, very different, and just obviously didn't work, and the audience knew it. They tuned out, and they just kept tuning out until finally the show was gone.
Yeah, that could always be a problem. Even with films itself, it's like they'll make an existing franchise, but then it's like it can be high hopes, but then very disappointing at times.
Oh, that's true. I mean, even a year before they attempted to put a remake of V on the air, they tried to resurrect My Bionic Woman, and before it went on the air, the president of Warner Brothers Television told me that it was tracking higher than any show ever in the history of Western civilization. It was going to be this humongous hit. And I said, but have you seen the pilot? And he said, no, but it doesn't matter. I've seen the numbers. The numbers are fantastic. They're through the roof. And I said, but have you seen the pilot? No, I haven't. What difference does that make? And I said, well, the difference that makes is that I have seen the pilot, and it doesn't work. David Icke is a really talented guy who was the guy behind it, but it missed. It was not right. It didn't have the humanity, none of the humor. Certainly it didn't have the actress that I had, and it didn't have the heart that the original Bionic Woman had. And again, it went on the air the first night, big numbers, 15 million people tuned in. The second week, a third of them went away. The third week, another third of them went away, and the new Bionic Woman was canceled in 7 or 8 weeks. And I got to say, David Icke is a stand-up guy in my book, because when it did crash and burn like that, he was the first one to say in several interviews, we never figured out what the show was about or how to do it, and it didn't have any heart. And he said exactly everything that I spotted when I saw the pilot. And I thought it was really, really noble of him to be able to stand up and say, "We blew it."
A lot of them don't even have the guts to even say that anymore. It's like, okay, we'll just move on. I have no recollection of that. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, right. Well, it wasn't me. It must have been their problem over there. No, I'm sorry. When you screw up, you got to stand up and take your hits, just like you get to stand up and take your praise when you have something that's successful.
Look, your other projects, let's say they bombed. I mean, how would you react to that per se? You move on from that?
Oh, well, yeah, you have to. I mean, I've had certainly my share of stuff that did not succeed, but generally in television, it was not because the quality wasn't good, because all the stuff that I have done in television has fortunately been reviewed and critically pretty well. But like back in 1986, for example, I created a show called Shadow Chasers. It was about two guys investigating unexplained phenomena. One was a sort of a reporter for a National Enquirer type newspaper, and the other was an academic who just didn't like any of this business at all. And it was it was the X-Files, but it was 5 years before the X-Files,
Yeah.
And it also had a sense of humor. And we got tremendous reviews from the piece, but they put it on, ABC did, opposite Bill Cosby and Magnum, when both of those shows were absolutely at their peak of success. And, we didn't get any ratings. So they canceled the show after about 13 weeks, as they had canceled every show that had been tried in that time period for several years, and for several years after. We, as a matter of fact, ended up having the highest ratings in that time period that ABC had for years and years and years. But it was strictly a situation of it was the bad time period, and that's happened to me several times. You never know how what the luck of the draw is going to be like, but you go in and do the best job you possibly can, and fortunately the critics have always loved it, but unfortunately there have been many times when the studios and the networks have just put them on in the wrong time period. And or in Short Circuit 2, for example, the motion picture I did in 87, 88, Fisher Stevens was in the original picture, and a wonderful actor, won an Academy Award a couple of years ago for being the producer on The Cove. Terrific guy. But in the original movie, they had Steve Guttenberg and Ali Sheedy, who were not big stars, but at least they were really recognizable names. And when they asked me to do the sequel, I said, well, who's going to star? And they said, well, Fisher's going to star, and the robot is going to star. And I said, no, wait, guys, that doesn't work. And I kept saying, you've got to put a star in here. They just didn't want to spend the extra money. And so the movie opened, and it did pretty well, actually. But I knew in my heart of hearts that it could have done a lot better and drawn in a bigger audience and made more money for the studios and everybody involved if they had listened to me and let me bring in somebody with a little bit bigger name. But in addition to Fisher, Fisher always would have had the role that he had, but it was not to be. And and all you can do is do the best you can do every single time and put your heart into it, and if it works, then that's a delightful thing, and if it doesn't work, you say, okay, well, what's next? And when you enter the world of show business, you have to acknowledge the fact that you are a gypsy. You are entering a gypsy business where one day it's feast and the next day it's famine, and that's the way it goes. And the idea is just to try to keep your batting average, above 500. If you can do that, that's terrific. And win a little bit more than you lose. And I've always been very content and never had any regrets of the shows that I have turned down or the projects that didn't go quite the way that I wanted them to. But I got a question from somebody the other day saying, what was the show that you absolutely didn't like the most doing? And I went back and I realized there was never a show like that. I enjoyed every single one of the projects that I did, and I knew I was going to enjoy it going in, or I wouldn't have done it, because life's too short to be doing bad stuff. And you can make a lot of money doing movies like Saw and really ugly, violent stuff, and I've turned down a lot of stuff like that. The original RoboCop came across my desk years and years ago, and I said, the script was really mean-spirited and ugly and ultra-violent, and underneath there was a germ of something that could have some humanism in it. And I said, look, can I take this script and turn it into something a little more than just a slasher and smasher picture? And they said, no, that's what we want to do. And I said, well, no, then I'm not going to do it. And my agent at the time went crazy. He said, oh, my God, it's going to make $100 million, this movie. And I said, yeah, I'm afraid it probably will. And he said, well, yeah, but then you can do anything you want. And I said, yeah, but I will have made that movie. And I just didn't want to put that vibe out into the world. I would rather not make something that's ugly and violent and mean-spirited just because of money. No thanks.
You have your own priorities, so if you feel that you feel like that's the way you want to do it, then don't do it, man.
That's right.
Because your name is going to be attached to that, regardless. It's going to hit out there, and
that's right. You can never take your name off of it once it's on there. When I was at Universal, a couple of times they came to me and with a lot of really crappy ideas, and they said, "Well, look, they said you don't have to be involved. We just like to put your name on it." And I said, "Wow, wait a minute. What are you talking about? If you put my name on it, then everybody will think I'm involved, and that's really bad, because particularly if it's a project that I disagree with, emotionally and spiritually and humanistically, I guess would be the right word. They said, but you'll make all this money. And I said, thanks, guys. I would like to make a lot more money than I make, but not at that cost.
Yeah. Well, speaking of going back to the short circuit, we do have a submitted question here.
Sure.
And Sean asked, would you consider on making a sequel, and if so, what would you change about it?
To Short Circuit 2?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I'd put a bigger name in it, obviously, as I mentioned, but there has been a lot of talk over the years of trying to do a Short Circuit 3. David Foster, who produced both of the first two movies, has been laboring on it for a decade, I think, and they've gone through several writers and several scripts. I've not seen any of them. They tell me that, once again, it's stalled. They just can't seem to get it right, and they feel that the old Johnny Five, to try to bring that particular robot back would be a mistake. They needed to upgrade him and all of that and make him look different. And as soon as I heard that, it was like, no, what people loved was the fact that he was funky and that he was sort of slapped together, and he was clearly a robot, and he wasn't CGI, and he was really in the room with you. It was fascinating to watch people. They'd come to visit the set, and the puppeteers, Gordon, Trish, and Rob, who operated and performed Johnny Five, they'd be standing 10 feet away, and operating the robot, but people would be totally talking to the robot, because he became a total alive character, and because they could ad-lib with him. It was fabulous. And as a matter of fact, it was very strange when the movie was over. When a project is over, usually you've made friends, and you stay in touch with them over the years, and you call them up later on and like that. And I do still. I've talked to Rob and Gordon and Trish many times over the years since we did that. When the movie was over, Johnny was gone. It was like a friend had died, because without the three of them working together, there was no Johnny Five, and I really went through a period of mourning where I really felt a loss. And I was at Eric Allard's effects shop. Eric's the brilliant guy who built Johnny to begin with. And we were doing Alien Nation. It caused to go over to Eric's shop, and I was walking through one of the back rooms, and I saw standing in a corner Johnny Five, and I had to look away. I just couldn't. I couldn't go there. It was a bit like going to a funeral where there's an open coffin, and you look in and there's the person that you used to know, but it's not really, and they're really dead, and that's the feeling that I had when I just happened to glance at him in that warehouse. It was like, ow, I can't go there. So it was a real loss after he went away.
Yeah. But that's pretty sad. I mean, but the best thing is it's like he warmed a lot of hearts. They're like rooting for the robot to win.
Well, absolutely. Well, and that was the thing. I mean, when Jeff Sagansky at TriStar first asked me to take a look at the script, I did, and it was very funny. It was a lot of big sight gags and all that, but I felt that they were using Johnny Five rather like a prop to get jokes off of, rather than really mining. I said, Jeff, you really got the Elephant Man here. He said, what are you talking about? It's about a little movie about a robot. I said, yes, but Johnny Five is like the Elephant Man or Quasimodo in Notre Dame by Victor Hugo, where people see the surface and they can't see through to what's underneath because the surface becomes too repellent or is a stereotype or whatever. And I said, let me rework the script a little bit so that we can really mine all the humanistic aspects of it, about the fact that inside this strange exterior, there's a pure soul burning alive, as there was in The Elephant Man and in Quasimodo. and I said, I won't lose any of the humor or the jokes and the gags and the visual stuff, but we'll have a movie that will have audiences not only laughing but crying because they get so emotionally hooked up into Johnny, and that's what we did, and that's exactly what happened. It was amazing to sit in the middle of an audience and listen to them crying as Johnny was being beaten or as he was dying. It was really compelling stuff. I was very, very proud of what we did.
Yeah, and you can almost even compare it to real life. If you watch that film, that's pretty much how it is.
Yeah, you're right. That's it, because in a strange way, a movie about a robot is really a movie about humanism and what it means to be a whole human being.
Yeah. Go and plug in anything that you would like to share with us.
Oh, there's nothing really except to thank all of my friends out there who may be listening, who have been fans of my work over the years. I mean, as I said, the whole reason I got into this business was to entertain people and to tell them stories and to make them think. That's one of the things I try to impress upon my filmmaking students when I teach occasionally around the country at the New York Film Academy here and UCLA and USC and the English National Film School, and also actually at the State University of Moscow. That was a great experience too. And one of the things I really try to emphasize to them is the importance of what they choose to tell their stories about. I do mention the fact that, yeah, you can make a lot of money making scary, awful, ugly slasher horror pictures. You make them cheap and they make a lot of money, and wow, isn't that great? And my feeling is, no, it's not great. I urge them to look instead and to aspire after the works of the great humanist filmmakers, my favorite of whom being the Japanese director Akira Kurosawa, who's just unmatched in his ability to touch on humanism. And his movie The Seven Samurai, I think, is probably the greatest movie I have ever seen, because it combines everything you want in a movie: action, adventure, romance, suspense, drama, comedy, and it's brilliant. And it's in Japanese, for God's sake, but it totally draws you in. And it just as the work of a lot of the work that Steven Spielberg has done, a lot of the work that contemporarily that like Ronnie Howard has done in many different spheres, and certainly the work of the great classic directors like William Wyler, people like that. And I urge all my film students to really try to use those as role models for what they would choose to do, and to try to just make their audiences think and be better human beings for having seen their work.
And there you go, guys. Kenneth Johnson, director / producer, amongst others.
Thanks a lot.